Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Something About Music, and it's time for a review of the new Julian Casablancas album, Julian Casablancas The Voidz, Tyrany. This is the second solo album from famed Strokes singer Julian Casablancas, the Strokes being one of my favorite bands of probably the last 10 or 12 years. They've really defined the indie rock and garage rock sound for a lot of bands to come out of that era in the 2000s. Arctic Monkeys, namely, Silver Sun Pickups, the Fratiles, Jet. A lot of different bands owe a lot to the Strokes. And Julian Casablancas has always been a very interesting person to me. He's been, like Ryan Adams and other people I've mentioned before, a musician that I've really admired as a songwriter. He battled an alcohol addiction and a smoking addiction early on in his musical career with the Strokes, and as a result had to drop the Strokes to kind of clean his act up, and then returned to the Strokes in 2011. Anyway, we're not here to talk about the Strokes, even though they did drop a new album last year. I have not looked at it yet. I've been meaning to look at it for a very long time now. I want to review at some point. But we're talking about his solo workers. I don't want to call this a solo project because it's not. It's his side work, I guess. This is one of his side projects. This is Julian Casablancas The Voidz, Tyrany, and The Voidz. The Voidz. It implies it's not solo. Anyway, this is a very interesting homage to the 80s, you could say. Casablancas is in his 30s. He is an 80s child. So it makes a little bit of sense that he'd do something like this very lo-fi, glitchy synthesizer kind of thing. And he does so in a very strange way. He doesn't do it in a normal, typical fashion. There's a lot of, when you think of like an 80s movie or an 80s homage or whatever, when I say the word 80s homage, you might be thinking, oh, it's gonna sound like an 80s pop song or an 80s, like a maybe even a hair metal thing. But no, this is not what this album is at all. This is an art rock album. This is not a headbanger, jump up and down, get really loud kind of thing. Even though there are tracks on there that do that, that's not what this is. This is a very lo-fi, glitchy synthesizer, compressed vocals type thing that almost reminds me of earlier Strokes albums. Is This It? More reminiscent of this album, honestly. I find a lot of their first album, Is This It, on Tyrany. But it's just a very interesting idea. And it's original. It's original as hell. One thing I've admired about Julian Casablancas is that his originality is like he's like teeming with originality, Anyway, let's get right into this. Let's talk about some of the good stuff about this album before we get into the cons. But let's just start right off the back. Take Me in Your Army. Really fitting opening, very hazy. And I like the chorus of it a lot. Just, take me in your army. Just very, just very moody and kind of weary, And I think it works out. I think it works very well with this album. I think it's a very good opener. Take Me in Your Army. There's a really good line in it. It says, "This isn't for everybody. This is for nobody." Meaning, fans of the Strokes aren't gonna like this, or fans of the Strokes shouldn't expect this, or no, fans of the Strokes shouldn't really be expecting what I've done in the past, That's kind of what this is. and it's just a really fitting opener. And on this album, Casablancas really is starting to show off his vocal chops. Something I've been waiting for him to do for a while, because he's a very good singer. He just doesn't really want to show it off as much. He did on, or like some of the Strokes albums, First Impressions of the Earth and Angles, but not so much even on their earlier stuff, like Room on Fire or Is This It? So it's nice to see him kind of expand as a vocalist, Crunch Punch is a really good example of this, where he just gets to a point where he's singing octaves that fucking some people wish they could sing, Fucking Chris Cornell wish he could sing that high, There's also some really noisy, unconventional solos on this record, guitar solos on this record, that would sound out of place, but they work so well, So it's nice. There's also very hazy, again, whiny vocals that you don't that don't really overstay their welcome or wear you out too much. It's very reminiscent of like Matt Schultz from Cage the Elephant, who I don't think is as good as a singer as Casablancas, but it's the same sort of vocal style, if that makes sense. They have very similar singing voices. Very, very, maybe not whiny, but raspy, kind of, that kind of thing. The compressed vocals also sound a lot like earlier Strokes stuff, like, again, Is This It? Namely, because there was a lot of voice compression on that album. Just go fucking listen to Is This It? If you haven't already. It's a great album. Anyway, there's a lot of great bass lines and improv guitar solos. I know I mentioned the guitar solos before, but some of the guitar solos just happen when you least expect it, and it sounds so cool. It sounds really, really cool. And the bass lines is just very consistent. They pretty much go out throughout the whole album. Even when things start to get heavy, you can still hear that bass line chugging along. And things really do get heavy on this album. This album is not for the faint of heart. If you're going into this expecting kind of the Strokes, if you're going in expecting Last Night or Reptilia, you're going to be completely blown out of the water. Your expectations are going to be completely shattered, because this is not what this album is. This is a very, very destructive art rock album that's just heavy. And speaking of heaviness, Human Sadness, the lead single off this album, which is 11 fucking minutes long, absolutely explodes around the 5-minute point, and is just this muddy, like, just destructive monster of a song. The bass just really picks up. There's a lot of fuzz. There's a lot of noise. Just a lot of different sounds going on, and I like that. I like that a lot. I think that's really cool. The glitchy synths really fit in well with the lo-fi distortion and compression to create this messy 80s influenced thing, I don't even want to call it like a rock album. It's like a thing, There's a lot of other tracks too that feel like just this awesome, fast jungle of noises, similar to, again, Arctic Monkeys. I remember when I was listening to the track, I think it was Father Electricity. When I was listening to that track, I remember thinking, this sounds like fucking Brainstorm from Arctic Monkeys. It sounds like a loud jungle of noises with so many different things happening at once, and it just sounded really, really cool. And there's a lot of tracks like that. There's some drum machines that feel very tribal and large and like that kind of thing, and it sounds really, really cool. Another track I really liked was Business Dog. That sounds very similar to that of an 80s hardcore punk rock track. It's just very fast, It's over in about 3 minutes, I think, and it's just very fast, and it really makes you think. It really makes you feel like you're like listening to a Black Flag record all of a sudden, you know? Like Casablancas, he screams in the chorus. The lyrics are fast as shit. It's awesome. It's awesome. What was I gonna say? Fuck. It's a really awesome. Right. There's one lyric on there that I absolutely cracked up when I heard because it's so good. And he says, "I want to fuck your face for breakfast. I love being weird. It's so weird." Like, how do you come up with this shit? Like, there's a lot of lyrics like that too. But that's more of a problem, I think, for this album than it is a good thing. Because Casablancas is a very good songwriter. He takes a lot of different ideas and kind of throws them together on this album, and it creates nothing a lot of the time. And maybe that's not so much a bad thing now that I think about it, because it might be music that's more made to invoke emotion than it is to create a specific style of a meaning or something. I don't know. That's more of a subjective thing. One of my favorite lyrics on this album was "Another wild teenager in search of success. Welcome to the jewel of the modified West." I think that was off of "Dare I Care." Great lyric. I think that says a lot about the modern music industry, a lot about how materialistic of a society America is. That was a lyric to me that really stuck out. Now we're gonna get into some of the cons. There are some really weird samples. There's a lot of sampling going on in this album. There's some really fucking weird ones, even for an 80s homage. And like one of them is like in "Human Sadness," the single. There's this really fucking annoying scream that just happens while Jules is just singing. Like, why? Like, what is going on there? Why is there just a fucking scream thrown in there? Like, that doesn't... I don't like that, you know? And I'm not kidding. I scared the shit out of me the first time I heard it. I was like, what? I fucking jumped off my fucking couch. I was like, what am I listening to? I mean, I like "Human Sadness." I think it's a good track. But the scream that just comes out of nowhere, you're like, what the fuck? Why is that there? It feels like it was just thrown in there like for shock value. Like, what? Another really boring track that I just didn't like was "Xerox." There were some really weird vocal shifts, and the instrumental sounds like it could be a rap instrumental, which might be good for a rap album, but Julian Casablancas is not a rap singer or a rapper, you know? So I don't really think it works here too well. Another track I didn't like was "Nintendo Blood." That was awful. I'm sorry, that was awful. There was a fucking Microsoft text-to-voice machine in it while Julian was singing. It was incredibly out of place. It's stuff like that, the weird sampling, you know, and it feels so out of place with an otherwise really glitchy, you know, lo-fi synthesizer noises, and it just doesn't sound right. It just doesn't sound right when you add in these weird samples that just don't make sense. Anyway, that's my review of Julian Casablancas and The Voidz, Tyrany. You know, I like this album. I really do. I've always been a fan of Julian Casablancas ever since The Strokes' second album. I've always been really into them. I've always been a fan of The Strokes. Julian Casablancas is a really big deal, I think, to a lot of people. And if you are a Strokes fan going into this thinking that it's going to be a Strokes record, you're going to be disappointed. Hell, if you're like more of a pop rock guy, you're more of a radio rock kind of guy, you're probably not going to like this record so much. Because it's indeed an art rock album. But I like this a lot because it shows that Julian Casablancas can flex other muscles. To me, this is just another muscle that he's flexing, you know? And I think this album really worked out for him the better. I know that this album's been getting a lot of really mixed reviews, but I really wanted to review this album because it sounded really cool. I'm gonna have to go with probably a 8 out of 10 on this one. You know, I I liked it a lot. But there's just some really weird shit going on here that just feels so out of place and really incoherent with the rest of the album. I mean, if you took that away, I think it'd be a really solid art rock album. But just that shit bugs me so much that there's like the scream thrown in there, and then there's the voice-to-text machines, and some of it just in the vocal shifts. It's just weird. But there's also a lot of really good stuff about this album, you know? It's cool how it can go from being very slow to very fast instantly, you know? And so I think an 8 out of 10 is fitting for this, because there's a lot of stuff I really do like about this album. Anyway, that's my review of Julian Casablancas and The Voidz, Tyrany. If you have given this album a listen, what did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you feel indifferent towards it? What album should I review next? Did you have a Merry Christmas? I hope you did. Having a Happy New Year. I'm rushing a couple more reviews out for the end of the year, because these next couple albums are reviews I've been really, really, really wanting to do. And then I'm gonna talk about my favorite albums of 2014. All right. Thank you for watching.